Handouts are coming around. However, I'm focusing on something different today in light of the time period in which we live right now. Most of you are aware that we're coming into what in traditional Christianity is called the Advent season. You only have to look around you for a little bit and you see that trees are going up, wreaths are going up, and that this is the time period in which the world in which we live celebrates the birth of Yeshua, Jesus, our Messiah. So I want to talk and give you the scriptural background, the biblical background for Yeshua before he was Jesus. In the idea of this, what we're calling angel-morphic Christology, that is the principal angel, this angel who is Yeshua, and this man who appears. We have three basic terms that we need to keep in mind. The first one is Elohim. We can see the word Elohim, which is the plural of El meaning strength or might. So we can say Elim or Elohim. Then we have Adonai, which means Lord or Master, Adonai. And then we have Yod, He, Vav, He, the Yod, the He, and the Vav, and the He, that come together, which we call the Tetragrammaton, these four letters that speak of the name of God. So Yod, He, Vav, He, Yahweh, Elohim or Elim, and Adonai. Okay, these show up in our text. We then have in the Hebrew Scriptures a principal angel. This one who is called the Malach. Malach meaning messenger, although in Greek it became translated angel. Malach Adonai, the angel of the Lord. And this angel of the Lord is Yeshua. He is this second entity, this second one. So while our world around us will celebrate Yeshua's coming, when we get to Luke chapter 2 and Matthew chapter 1, I want you to be aware that this was not the first time that Yeshua came. He had come before, and he would come again, and he would come again, and he would come again. He would walk amongst his people, and he would be present with them. The first encounter we have with the angel of the Lord, go with me to Genesis chapter 16. Genesis chapter 16. I'm going to walk you through these references. I hope you'll take note of them, write them down, or mark them in your Bible so that if someone were to ask you about Yeshua, about Jesus, you could say, let me show you him in the Hebrew Scriptures. Let me show you him in the other side of the Bible that was actually his Bible. Genesis chapter 16 tells us the story of a foreigner named Hagar who had been living with Avraham and Sarai. We pick up the reading in verse 7. Now the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur, and he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hand. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly so that they shall not be counted for multitude. Notice that he knows her name, he knows what she's been doing, and he gives her a promise of descendants. This angel of the Lord knows her name, he knows what she's been doing, she's been Sarai's mistress, and then he promises her descendants and progeny. I will multiply. This is the angel of the Lord, the Malach Adonai. Notice what he does. Notice what he says. He knows who she is, although they've never met. He knows what she's been doing, although they've never had a discussion about her prior life. He says, you've been Sarai's mistress. How does he know this? He appears and she can see him. They talk. They have discussion. And he says to her, you're going to have children. You're going to have multiple descendants. This is the Malach Adonai. This is angel-morphic Christology. That is Christ, the Anointed One, as the form of an angel, where we can see him. Okay? How is he different from other? How is he different from other angels? I hope when I summarize this, we'll see how he's different from all the other angels. There are certain things that the Malach Adonai, things that he can do and things that he is, that other angels, it's never said of them. Now let me summarize just for a second. Because I remember I mentioned we have Elohim. Most of the time in our text, when we want to talk about Ha Elohim, the text will say Ha Elohim. So we know that we're dealing with the Elohim. When we want to talk about Adonai, the Masoretes did a little thing for us. Normally the word Adonai, just translated Lord, will have a patak vowel at the end. However, when they want us to know that we're talking about Adonai, they put a chametz at under the last vowel. They changed the vowels to say to us, although they're pronounced the same, this is a little key to tell you we think this is Adonai, that one. Okay? So Elohim, Ha Elohim, that one. Adonai, that Adonai, the one up there. Okay? So they let us know. Then, of course, we have Yod He Vav He. There can only be one. We have Elohim that are created. These other gods. Okay? Who is like you among the Elohim? Elim. Mikamoka ba'elim. Elim, plural. Who is like you among the gods, O Lord? We have these other Elohim that are up here as well. Okay? And we have Malachim. Okay? We have two. They're called Malachim when they come down, when they're sent as messengers. Okay? Because that's what Malachim means. Those who have a message. So we have the two, Elohim, Malachim. Okay? We're going to see some major differences between this Malach Adonai in the text, and that's a great question. So now go with me to Genesis chapter 22. Genesis chapter 22. Genesis chapter 22, you'll know this as the Akedah, or the binding of Isaac. We want to pick up the reading in verse 11. Verse 11, Genesis 22, verse 11 says, "But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Hineni, here am I. And he said, Do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him, for I know that you fear God, Elohim, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." From me? Then Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, skip down to verse 15. Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time out of heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, your only son. Blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven and as the sand which is on the seashore. This is the second time that he's allowed to say, I will promise you descendants. He says it to Hagar, Genesis 16. No other angel is allowed to, that we have in the text, is allowed to say, I will give you progeny. The Lord will give you, right. The Lord will give you. But now he says, I will do this. And you've done this. This is about me. And he stops Abraham from sacrificing Isaac when it was Yod He Vav He who had commanded him to do it. If that's the case, this would be the only incident we have where we're recorded for us, where we have an angel stopping someone from doing something that God's commanded. And doesn't say that God has done it. Doesn't have to say, okay, the reason I'm stopping you is because God said you shouldn't do this. Or Adonai said you shouldn't do this. Or Elohim said you shouldn't do this. He just says, stop, Abraham, stop this. Don't do this anymore. Okay? So here we have a Malach Adonai, the angel of the Lord, promising children again, stopping Abraham from doing something that God had commanded him to do. All right. Now, go look at chapter 28 of Genesis. Right. No. No, he didn't want him to. No, absolutely not. Now look at verse 10, chapter 28, Genesis chapter 28. It says, Now Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. So he came to a certain place and stayed there all night because the sun had set. Then he took one of the stones of that place and put it at his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep. Then he dreamed, and behold, a ladder was set up on the earth, and its top reached to heaven. And there the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your descendants. Also your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and the east, to the north and the south. And you and in your seed, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! There is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Okay. Then Jacob rose early in the morning, and he called the name of that place, verse 19, Bethel, house of God. There's angels going up and down, and he sees God at the top of this ladder, of this extension that goes from heaven to earth. Now notice that this occurs at Bethel. Okay? As he's leaving the land of Israel. Notice where this is at. This is at Bethel, as he's getting ready to leave the land of Israel. Here's my point. We're going to see in chapter 32, which we just read for our Torah reading, that when he gets ready to come back into Israel, he encounters this camp of angels again. What I'm saying is this, that at the outskirts of, on the border of Israel, there is an army of angelic beings that guard the entrance to Israel. And we can see that from chapter 28. When he leaves, there's these angels that going up and down. And then when he comes back, it's the camp of God, where again we have these other angels. Okay? Now, check this out. Next text. Go with me to Genesis chapter 31. Genesis chapter 31. And verse 11. Genesis 31, verse 11. Look what he says. So just so you see what I'm saying here. He says, And it happened at that time when the flocks conceived, that I lifted my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked and speckled and gray-spotted. Then the angel of God, Ha Elohim, spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Hineni. And he said, Lift your eyes now and see, all the rams which leap on the flocks are streaked, speckled, and gray-spotted. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. Look at this. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar, and where you made a vow to me. Now arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your family. I'm the angel of Elohim. I spoke to you. There we found in chapter 28, he was the Malach Adonai. We can call him the Malach Adonai, or we can call him the Malach Elohim, the angel of God. Either one. This is this principal angel. This is the one who is the second person that we see in the text, this one who comes down. All right, Genesis chapter 48. Genesis chapter 48. And look at verse 15. Genesis 48, verse 15. This is Jacob blessing his children. Jacob blessing his children, and he says, And he blessed Joseph and said, God, that is Elohim, Ha Elohim, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walk, the Elohim who fed me all my life to this day, the angel who redeemed me from evil, bless the lads. The angel, okay, the Malach. Okay, he knows who this one is. He's encountered this angel as he's left Israel and as he's come back to Israel. He knows this one. This angel of Elohim, this angel of Adonai, Malach Adonai. This is Yeshua. What I'm saying is this. I've just shown you all the way through Genesis the angel of the Lord, or the angel of Ha Elohim, and that is Yeshua. That's Jesus. And so I have all my brothers and sisters in evangelical thinking who say to me, well, we don't get Jesus until we get to Matthew chapter 1 and Luke chapter 2. And I'm saying, no, if you want to do Christology, if you want to do the thinking about who Yeshua was, you have to go all the way back to Genesis and work your way through. This is who he is. Well, let's see if it stops in Genesis. Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3. Now watch this one. This one gets really interesting. Exodus chapter 3. Now Moses was tending the flock of Yithro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. Notice this is the first time we have fire. We'll talk about that in a little bit in a moment. But the bush was not consumed. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So when the Lord, now that's Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. When the Lord saw that he turned aside, God, Ha-Elohim, called to him from the midst of the bush. I now have the angel of the Lord, Ha-Elohim, and Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh there in the text. It's a very crowded bush. There are three of them there. Then he said, do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. This is the mountain of God, holy ground, angel of the Lord. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, and he goes on to speak here, we have Elohim, we have Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and we have the angel of the Lord. The angel of the Lord appeared. The only one you can see is the angel of the Lord. This is the one you can see. This is the one you can touch. He is Ha-Elohim, or Adonai, or Yahweh, come down. But this was not Matthew 1 and Luke 2 were not the first time he came down. My point is, he's been coming down all along. All right, Exodus chapter 23. Actually, before we even do that, let's go to Exodus chapter 12. Exodus chapter 12. I'm going to walk you through a little bit more here. Look what it says in verse 12. Exodus 12:12. This is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh speaking, Yahweh speaking. He says in verse 12, for I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and I will strike the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. Okay? Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Now the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Skip over to verse 23. For the Lord will pass through to strike the Egyptians, and when he sees the blood on the lintel and on the two doorposts, the Lord will pass over the door and not allow the destroyer, Ha-Mashkit, the destroyer, to come into your houses to strike you. Who's this destroyer? That's Yeshua. That destroyer. The destroyer has the article there. The destroyer. He will not allow the destroyer to come and mess with you. Now, look what happens. Look at the end. Look at the end of chapter 13, verse 21. Chapter 13, Exodus, verse 21. And the Lord went before them. This is the Lord is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Went before them in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire. This is the second time we've had fire. The burning bush, Exodus chapter 3. Now here again we see fire. He's in this pillar of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night from before the people. So the pillar of fire and the cloud, they contain the throne room of God, the chariot throne of God, that has fire all around it. And attending this throne are seraphim angels that are known as the burning ones. That's what seraphim means, burning ones. There's fire. This is why there's fire in the bush. This is why there's fire over the tabernacle, because he sits enthroned in this chariot throne above the cherubim. The cherubim are the guardians of his holiness. So we have cherubim, seraphim, and the ark is his footstool. Now notice what happened in Leviticus chapter 10. If you think about the tabernacle, when you came into the holy place, to your right was the table of showbread, to your left was the menorah, and directly in front of you was the altar of incense. Nadab and Avihu, descendants of sons of Aharon, Aaron, they go into the holy place. And look what happens. They walk in and they go to the altar of incense. They're probably drunk. They offer what the text says is strange fire, unauthorized incense on the altar. And it says that fire comes from the holy place and strikes them. Let me suggest to you that the reason this fire comes down and toasts them is because it's the throne room of God, this chariot throne of God, that sends down fire, this pillar of fire, and just comes down and just comes right out the holy place, under the veil, and just, because it's just on the other side of the veil is where they are, and just toast them. God just says, with fire. And it didn't take that long. Yeah. Yeah, they brought unauthorized coals into the place. And God just sends down fire from this chariot. It comes down, goes into the holy place, under the veil, and bam, hits those two, and they go just like that. Toast. But it's fire from this chariot ark. This is why we see him in the burning bush. We see fire, and the bush is not consumed because he's in the fire. There's fire all around his throne, all around his chariot. We'll see that in just a moment. Stay with me. Exodus chapter... I want to finish up. Go over to verse 19 of Exodus chapter 14. Remember, at the end of 13, it said the Lord, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, would lead them. Look at chapter 14, verse 19. And the angel of Elohim went before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. So the angel of Elohim is in this cloud and he's in this fire. And wherever he moves his chariot, wherever the chariot moves, that's when the people move. Because he sits enthroned in this chariot above the cherubim. Now, look at Exodus chapter 23. Exodus chapter 23. Exodus chapter 23, picking it up in verse 20. Behold, I send an angel before you to keep you on the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him and obey his voice. Do not provoke him, for he will not pardon your transgressions. My name is in him. That's key. No other angel is that said of. My name is in him. But if you indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. For my angel will go before you to bring you into the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites. And he goes on. My name is in him. Obey him, for he will not pardon your transgressions. How can he forgive sins? My name is in him. He's going to be the one to go before you. And yet it says Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is going to be the one to go before you. But who's this one we can see? The one we can see is this angel. This is Christology. This is Yeshua before he was ever Jesus. This is Jesus before he was Jesus. But we just knew him as the angel of the Lord or the angel of God. He was coming and working with his people all along. He was with his people. He was ministering amongst them. He was protecting them. He was guarding them. All along he was with them. Remember I said that he has a chariot army. He's the leader of an army. So he's going to be called Adonai Sivaot, which is a nice term because your translations just translated Adonai of hosts. As if he were a host at a restaurant. As if you walked into this cosmic restaurant and said, yes, I'd like a table for two. And your host would come up and say, yes, well, we'll take you to this table. No, it has nothing to do with that. Adonai of hosts means Adonai of armies. Okay, now remember Exodus chapter 3. Now we come across this man. We encounter a man. Every time this angel appears, he's a man. He looks like a man. Without the ability to die. I'm going to show you something else before we even get to that. Go with me to Numbers chapter 22. Numbers chapter 22 first. I want to tie in two scriptures here. Numbers chapter 22. You have to see this. Numbers chapter 22 and verse 22. Numbers 22, verse 22. This is the oracles of Balaam. Balaam is hired by the king of Moab to curse Israel. And look what happens. Then God's anger was aroused. This is Elohim. Okay? Elohim's anger is aroused. God. And the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. I got Elohim there, and I've got the angel of the Lord. And he was riding on his donkey, and two of his servants were with him. Now the donkey saw the angel of the Lord. The donkey sees the angel of the Lord standing in the way. Now look at this. With his drawn sword in his hand. Note that. Drawn sword. And the donkey turned aside out of the way and went into the field. So Balaam struck the donkey to turn her back onto the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path between the vineyards, and a wall on this side and a wall on that side. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pushed herself against the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he struck her again. Then the angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn either to the right hand or to the left. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam. So Balaam's anger was aroused, and he struck the donkey with his staff. Look at this, verse 28. Then the Lord, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. I had Elohim earlier, I have the angel of the Lord, and now I have Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. All three there. What have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times? And Balaam said to the donkey, because you have abused me, I wish there were a sword in my hand, for now I would kill you. So the donkey said to Balaam, am I not your donkey on which you have ridden ever since I became yours to this day? Was I ever disposed to do this to you? And he said, no. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. I told you he's got a sword. He's got a sword, and we're going to see later on he's got chariots. He's weaponized and he's mechanized. This is a movable army that he has of these malachim, these angels. And the angel of the Lord said to him, why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to stand against you, because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, surely I would have killed you by now and let her live. Wow. Wow. It's a good thing your donkey laid down. Because if she hadn't have, if she had kept going and come after me and tried to go through me, the angel of the Lord says, I was going to take this sword and dispatch you. Well, okay, that messes up our view of Jesus, I know. People want a Jesus that, is kind and meek and gentle. But you know what? I'm telling you, you get to the book of Revelation. We got to the book of Revelation, and everybody says, well, that's Jesus. Here's the problem. He's on a white horse with an angelic army behind him, and it says he's got a sword strapped on. Well, that sounds very familiar. And this time he says, I'm not taking any prisoners. You thought it was bad that I would want to take Balaam. Wait till I get through with the rest of them.
And then come back as 10 years.
Yeah. Charles Bronson, yeah. It's like, he's coming back. He's coming back and he's saying, Yeshua's coming back with this sword and he's saying basically, you want a piece of me? You want a piece of me? Yeah. It's like, yes.
Well, if you look at Balaam, he just said, hey, if I had a sword, I'd basically kill you.
Right. I'd kill the donkey.
It's a good thing God didn't take his standard.
Right. Yeah.
He said, hey, I do have a sword.
Yeah, God in his mercy took mercy upon him and said, you know what? If it hadn't been for this animal stopping, I'd have killed you. And I have a sword.
And I still can.
Yeah, Balaam says, if I had a sword. God says, I have a sword. Yeah, a big one, yes.
Yeah, when we were talking about Revelation, and we're coming down, there's a description of it in Zechariah 12.
Yes.
Where the Lord dissolves the eyeballs in the king's eyes.
Yes.
The tongues in their mouths and the flesh off their bodies.
How does this sweet lady say all this stuff? That's how you... It's like, this little voice, this blonde hair, she's like... No, I'm kidding. Yeah, you're right. I know, man. Yeah. Believe me, you want to be in the army, not the object of his wrath. Yeah, and it says this, and it does say the sword comes out of his mouth. That's Zechariah 12. I was going to get to that later on. Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. You're jumping.
You also can go to 2 Kings 19, where the angel of the Lord all by himself killed 185.
Yeah, 2 Kings 19. 2 Kings 19, the angel of the Lord slays 185,000 Assyrians in one night. That's a night's work. Yes, hold on. Now, the man, because we saw in Exodus chapter 3 that the holy ground, you're on holy ground with this angel of the Lord. Then we just saw that in Numbers here that he has a drawn sword. Now let's put them together. Joshua chapter 5. Joshua chapter 5. And verse 13. Joshua chapter 5, verse 13. And it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, a man. This time, just Ish, a man, stood opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. That sound familiar? Numbers 22, a drawn sword. And Joshua went to him and said to him, are you for us or for our adversaries? And he said, no, as the commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. That's Adonai Sivaot, the army, this army of these Malachim, these sent ones. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped. Now, if this is a regular angel, he should say to Joshua, you got to get up. You can't worship me. I can't accept worship because I'm not worthy of worship. He doesn't do that. He doesn't stop him from worshiping him. Look what happens. The commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, take your sandal off your foot, for the place where you stand is holy. That sound familiar? That's Exodus chapter 3. This is not any ordinary man. He's the captain of the army of hosts. He has a drawn sword in his hand. He accepts worship, and he says, take your shoes off. You're on holy ground.
When he says, are you for or against us? And he says, no. It's because God is not our little mascot. He is who he is.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Look at 2 Kings chapter 6. 2 Kings chapter 6. Remember I said he's got an army with him. He's got a sword. He's got a horse. He's got a chariot. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Now look what happens. 2 Kings chapter 6. The context is, you can read about it a little bit later. I'm not going to get into that now. But verse 14. 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 14. This other king sends horses and chariots and a great army there. And they came by night and surrounded the city. And when the servant of the man of God arose early and went out. There was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, Alas, my master, what shall we do? So he answered, Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. You've got to be kidding me. And Elijah prayed and said, Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain, again the mountains, was full of horses and chariots of fire. Chariots of fire. All around Elisha, we have fire around this throne. So when the Syrians came down, Elisha prayed to the Lord, Strike this people, I pray, with blindness. And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. Okay, so now we have horses, we have chariots, and they're chariots of fire, and they're surrounding and making sure the people of God are safe. He says, open his eyes so he can see. And he sees this army of chariots of fire. This is why he's the man with the drawn sword, just like we saw with Balaam. And you have to be careful because you're on holy ground when you're around him. You have to take off your shoes because it's sanctified ground around him. Yeah. Yes, it is. Right. No, you can't walk a fence with God. God doesn't allow for fence walkers. You are either in his camp or you're not in his camp. You are either all in or you're all out. There's nobody that gets to have a foot in both camps. You don't get to fence walk. You're either sold out to him or you're sold out to the other side. There's two armies. There's a battle raging. You're in one of two armies. You are in an army. Whether you realize it or not, you are in an army. By default, you are in an army. Now the question becomes, are you in the army of the Lord? Or are you in the army of the evil one? And believe me, the evil one rebelled. There was rebellion. Okay? We'll talk about that in a moment. Go with me to Ezekiel chapter 1. Ezekiel chapter 1. I'm coming back to the angel of the Lord in just a moment. But I want to shoot this trail just for a few more minutes here. Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 15. 1:15. Look at what happens here. This is Ezekiel's vision. He says, Now as I looked, Ezekiel 1:15, Now as I looked at the living creatures, behold, a wheel was on the earth beside each living creature, with its four faces. The appearance of the wheels and their workings were like the color of beryl, and all four had the same likeness. The appearance of the workings were, as it were, look at this, a wheel in the middle of a wheel. It's like a gyroscope. This chariot can turn on a dime. It can turn in midair. It's like a Harrier jet. It can just up like this and then just, or it can just decide to go, or it doesn't matter. Any direction it wants to go, at any moment it wants to go that direction. It's not bound by time or space, and there is no directional challenges to this. It's a wheel. We have four wheels within a wheel, within wheels. It's just, he's just trying to describe this thing, and it's an amazing thing. Now look what happens. He's looking up from the bottom. He's down here looking up at this thing. Look what he says. Verse 22, the likeness of the firmament above the heads of the living creatures was like the color of awesome crystal, stretched out over their heads. And under the firmament their wings spread out straight, one toward the other. Each had two wings on one side, and each had one which covered the other side of the body. When they went, I heard the noise of their wings like the noise of many waters, like the voice of the Almighty, a tumult, like the noise of an army. A voice came from the firmament that was over their heads. Whenever they stood, they let down their wings. Look at this. And above the firmament, over their heads, was the likeness of a throne. Remember I said there was a chariot throne? Like a sapphire stone. On the likeness of the throne was a likeness with the appearance of a man high above it. Whew! What we got here, man? Wow. And also from the appearance of his waist and upward I saw, as it were, the color of amber with the appearance of fire all around within it. I told you more fire. And from the appearance of his waist downward I saw, and as it were, the appearance of fire with brightness all around, like the appearance of a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day. So was the appearance of the brightness all around it. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And he's a man on a throne, on a chariot that's got fire all around it. This is what Ezekiel sees, okay? Now, I'm going to back up and let's go to the angel of the Lord. Go with me to Judges chapter 13. Then I'm going to fast forward us again. Judges chapter 13. Judges chapter 13. And look at verse 11. This is Manoah and his wife who are about to give birth to Samson. Second Judges chapter 13, verse 11. So Manoah arose and followed his wife. When he came to the man, he said to him, "Are you the man who spoke to this woman?" Pointing to his wife. And he said, "I am." Manoah said, "Now let your words come to pass. What will be the boy's rule of life and his work?" So the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, "Of all that I said to the woman, let her be careful. She may not eat anything that comes from the vine, nor may she drink wine or similar drink, nor eat anything unclean. All that I commanded her, let her observe." She's going to have a Nazirite vow, because Samson's going to be under Nazirite vow. Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "Please let us detain you, and we will prepare a young goat for you." And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, "Though you detain me, I will not eat your food. But if you offer a burnt offering, you must offer it to the Lord." For Manoah did not know he was the angel of the Lord. Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "What is your name? That when your words come to pass, we may honor you." And the angel of the Lord said to him, "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" In other words, it's like Jack Nicholson on the stand with Tom Cruise. You know, it's like, what do you want from me? You can't handle my name. We want to know your name. You can't handle my name. It's too wonderful. You got no idea who you're dealing with here. Yes, it is. It's wonderful. Same thing in Isaiah. Pele Yoetz El Gibor Aviad, and then this word right here as well. Yes, it is wonderful. Wonderful counselor. Same word. Pele. Why do you keep stealing my stuff, man? Man, that is just wrong. Okay, it used to be Don doing it. Now it's you. Just don't be connecting all the dots. Yeah. Okay, yeah. You're gonna have to. Yeah. You gotta do your part now. Okay. Yeah. No more reading for you. Okay. Look at verse 16. Look at verse. Verse 17. Look at verse 17. Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "What is your name?" Verse 18. And the angel of the Lord said to him, "My name, you asked my name, seeing it is wonderful." So Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it upon the rock to the Lord. And he did a wondrous thing while Manoah and his wife looked, and behold, as the flame went up toward heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame in the altar. He goes up with the sacrifice to say he's accepting it. He's accepting this sacrifice. Then, when Manoah and his wife saw this, they fell on the faces to the ground. When the angel of the Lord appeared no more to Manoah and his wife, then Manoah knew that he was the angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to his wife, we will surely die because we have seen God. That's Elohim. But his wife said, now, by the way, women tend to be, and this is my estimation here, and I'm not saying this to get on anybody's good side, but women tend to be more spiritually perceptive. I don't know why that is, but that just tends to be the case. Manoah says, we've just seen the angel of the Lord, which is God, Elohim, and we're going to die. But his wife has the rationale to say, that can't be the case. He can't kill us because he's just promised us we're going to have a child. Hello, right? If he was going to kill us, his wife's reasoning too is, if he was going to kill us, he would have already done that. He doesn't have to wait.
Even in the midst of death, you still think about babies.
Yeah. So look what happens. His wife said to him, if the Lord had desired to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from our hands. nor would he have shown us all these things, nor would he have told us such things as these at this time. Now look at this. So the woman bore a son and called his name Samson, and the child grew, and the Lord blessed him. And look at this. And the Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him. I have Elohim, I have Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, I have the angel of the Lord, and I have the Ruach. All four in this narrative. Ruach, Elohim, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, angel of the Lord. Okay? I don't know what we got going here, but all right. Angel of the Lord, this one who is Yeshua, this divine one. Okay? Let me stop here. Questions or comments? Yes?
I was going to say, I don't know where, but somewhere it says, be careful when you're entertaining strangers because they have like
It's Hebrews. Hebrews what? 13. Hebrews 13. Hebrews 13. Yeah, beware because you've entertained angels unaware. Right.
that blend of angels and men. Your five senses can't always discern.
No, you can't see them. This is why until, you notice in two texts, in Numbers 22, until the Lord opens his eyes, he doesn't see the angel of the Lord. And then later on in 2 Kings chapter 6, he says, O Lord, open his eyes. There are some people, it seems, who see them, and some people who don't. Okay, now, so let me try to put this into some more perspective. So we have Elohim that are these gods. These Elohim are created beings. They are, we say in plural, Elim, or we can also say Elohim. If we're going to talk singular, we say El, which means strong, or Eloah, singular as well. El and Eloah, or plural, Elim or Elohim. God creates these Elohim to be and gives them the ability to rule the world, to rule the cosmos, under his guidance. Under his guidance, they will rule the areas that he has given them to rule, to make sure that on this earth, and maybe wherever else he has rulership that needs to be administered, they will do so. In the vastness of this cosmos, they will have control or governance. The problem is, in having given these Elohim governance, these Elohim decide to rebel. They decide to rebel. They have a leader. Like everything, you need a leader. And they have one. We're going to come to know him as Satan, which in Hebrew just simply means the adversary. Other people can be known as Satan, little s, because they become adversarial to others. So we have this army of Malachim, and we have the army of the fallen ones, those who have fallen from. Now, they create an army as well, like we said, and they have a leader. But God sits in council. He sits in council, and we call this the divine council, because he is the one who leads this council of Elohim. You're most familiar with this divine council in the book of Job. But there are other places where this divine council comes into play. 1 Kings chapter 19, Zechariah chapter 3, Job chapter 1 and 2. Go with me to Deuteronomy chapter 32. Deuteronomy chapter 32. This is the pivotal text that opens up the door to our understanding of this, although there are other texts as well. But Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8. Since God is in the heavens, and he is high above, we can call him Elyon, Most High, or El Elyon, God Most High. So, verse 8 of Deuteronomy 32 says, when the Most High divided their inheritance to the nations, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of, and most of your texts are going to read, the children of Israel. That translation is bad because the Septuagint, which is earlier, and the Dead Sea Scrolls have there, according to the number of the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. Methinks that the Masoretes tampered with the text. They didn't like the implications of the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God, being in control. Now look at verse 9. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the place of his inheritance. So what happens is, God has all the Elohim in council. And he says to this Elohim, I would like for you to rule over here and report back to me. I would like for you to go to that area and report back to me. I will take Israel. I'll guard Israel. And in fact, what he does is, he sends the Malach Adonai, the angel of the Lord, and says, set up your chariot army around Israel to make sure that they're protected. I want you to go down there and make sure everybody's okay. And I want you to make sure that the army of God is situated around the borders of Israel to keep out all who don't belong. Okay. Now, go with me to Psalm 82. Psalm 82. Remember I said there was a rebellion. Psalm 82. Psalm 82 says this. Elohim stands in the assembly of the El. In the congregation of the El. Or that some of your translators say the mighty, because El means strong. Yeah, mighty council. So some use it as an adjective, but it says, Elohim stands in the council of the El. He judges amongst the Elohim. So it's in parallel, El and Elohim, singular, plural. He says, how long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? And he castigates them here for not doing what he's commanded them to do. Then he said in verse 6, I said, you are Elohim, and you are children of the Most High, El Elyon. But you shall die like men, and fall like one of the princes. So they're going to die, because they have not been obedient to him. Now fast forward for a moment to our apostolic text, and what happens when Yeshua shows up here on this earth. Satan comes to tempt him. Why? The whole purpose of tempting the evil one was to get him to die. He wants to destroy Yeshua. He knows who he is. And did you notice at the end of this narrative, this temptation, verse 11, it says, and the angels came and ministered to him. Because I tell you, he's captain of the army of the host of angels. They're always present. They're always around Yeshua. They're always there. Does it surprise us when we get to Matthew chapter 1? Go with me to Matthew chapter 1. You have to have this background in order to understand what's going on. Matthew chapter 1. I may have gotten the wrong one. Hold on just a second here. Oh, excuse me. Go to Luke chapter 2. Sorry, Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2. Look at this. Luke chapter 2. Now, verse 8. Now there were in the same country shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over their flocks by night. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were greatly afraid. Then the angel said to them, do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Mashiach the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And this will be a sign to you. you will find a babe wrapped in swaddling clothes lying in a manger. Now look at, and suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly hosts, army again, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. So it was when the angels had gone away from them into heaven. I'm telling you, they're there all along. This is this angelic army that follows Yeshua everywhere he goes. They're always with him because he's the captain of the army of God. Okay? Now, with that in mind, and remember we talked about the thrones. I'm going to close up with this. Go with me to Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7. Yeshua's favorite self-designation. Yeshua's favorite self-designation was Son of Man. And here's why. Here's why he referred to himself that way. Because Son of Man could mean a person, a human being, or it could refer to this text here. Look at verse 9. Daniel chapter 7, verse 9. I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. That's Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And his garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. Look at this. His throne was a fiery flame. Verse 9 of chapter 7. Daniel 7, verse 9. Look at this. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. And thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. They can't even number them. We're just trying to give you a rough estimate. There's billions of these malach, these angels that are there, attendant to this fiery throne on which the Ancient of Days sits. The court was seated, the court, the divine council, and the books were opened. Now we skip down just 2 verses. Verse 13, I was watching in the night vision, and behold, one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. The clouds, remember the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night? That's the throne. He rides the clouds. Coming with the clouds of heaven, he came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. I said, like the Son of Man. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. I have the Ancient of Days, and I have this Son of Man. And he's riding the clouds, and he's on a chariot. There are thrones. Now, go with me to Matthew. Yes. Matthew chapter, I want to go to chapter 25, chapter 25, verse 31. Look at Matthew 25, 31. In light of what we just read, in light of what we've just been studying, look at what Yeshua says. Look at what Yeshua says. 25:31. Matthew 25:31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. And all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from the other, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. Okay? You can go on to read about that, but what is he talking about? The angels are coming with him on this cloud of glory. Son of Man. Now go over to chapter 28. This is Yeshua before Caiaphas. Chapter 28. No, excuse me, I'm sorry. Verse 26, excuse me, chapter 26, verse 62. 26:62. Here it is. The high priest, the Kohen HaGadol, arose and said to him, that's Yeshua, do you answer nothing? What is it that these men testify against you? But Yeshua kept silent, and the high priest answered and said to him, I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. Yeshua said to him, it is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power, Ancient of Days, and coming on the clouds of heaven. I'll be riding the clouds the next time you see me. Whoo! Well, he's just claimed to be the Son of Man in Daniel chapter 7. And if he's not, he's just committed blasphemy. How do I know that? Because the high priest tears his clothes, saying, he has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? But Yeshua says, the next time you see me, I'll be riding a cloud. It'll be a throne chariot with a lot of fire. There'll be a sword coming out of my mouth, and I'll have angels with me. And this time, we're taking no prisoners. This time, we're coming to bring the sword. And while I didn't dispatch the sword to Balaam, next time, there won't be anybody that gets away. If you understand what he's saying, it goes back to these texts we've just looked at. Because he's saying, that's me. This is Christology at its highest, to understand him from these texts. Because he says, these texts spoke of me. This was all about me. And beginning with Moses and the prophets, he expounded to them how the Messiah must come and must suffer. This is who he is. This angel of the Lord. That is Yeshua. He's the Son of Man, Daniel 7. He's the man in Joshua 5. This is who we encounter on the pages of the Hebrew Scriptures all along. And this is why Yeshua incorporates these texts about himself, because he's saying, that's me. That's me. That is me. And this is why there's an army of angels at his coming. There's why the army of angels shows up. He says to Pilate, you think you can take me, Pilate? He says, if I wanted to, I could call 10 legions of angels, and they would be here right now, and they would dispatch this whole scene. You're not taking me, I'm laying it down. And he's not being absurd, because if you looked at the throne room scene, this army, we see 10,000 times 10,000, thousands times thousands. They can't even put a number on it. They don't even know how to get their mind wrapped around this number. Now, go to Revelation chapter 4. Revelation chapter 4. Look at verse 2. 4. Revelation 4, verse 2. In light of everything we've just said, immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne set in heaven. And one sat on the throne, and he who sat there was like a jasper and a sardis stone in appearance, and there was a rainbow around the throne. Ezekiel. In appearance like an emerald. And around the throne were 24 thrones, and on the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white robes, and they had crowns of gold on their head, and from the throne proceeded lightnings, thunderings, and voices. 7 lamps of fire were burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. Behold, before the throne there was a sea of glass like crystal, and in the midst of the throne and around the throne were 4 living creatures, full of eyes in front and back. The first living creature was like a lion, the second like a calf, the third like a face of a man, and the fourth was like a flying eagle. The 4 living creatures, each having 6 wings, were full of eyes around and within, and they do not rest day or night, saying, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivaot, he who was and is to come. Whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne and who lives forever, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created. What a scene. What a scene. It's just like we saw in Ezekiel. This amazing scene as he looks up into heaven and he sees this throne of fire and all of these beings around this. He can't even get his mind wrapped around it all. You can't even hardly describe it. It's too wonderful and too magnificent to even try to put into words. We fail with words to even try to put it all into perspective. Any questions or comments?
Whose team are you on?
I want to be on. I hope I'm on the side of Adonai, angel of the Lord. That's the one I'm counting on. Yes. Yes. Go ahead. Thank you. All right. Any questions? Yes. Yeah, in the sense that you have, that you're talking about Psalm 82, where he says they will die like men. He's speaking to the Elohim. Remember what I said a couple weeks back. When the Elohim come to this earth, we call them Malachim, the sent ones or the messengers, and they have to have a host while they're here. So yes, they will die, and we don't know. Although we see in the book of Revelation that the lake of fire was made for the devil and his angels and his minions. With regard to them coming to this earth, whenever they come to this earth, they do recognize him, and they say things to him that he does not deny. They always know who he is and are accurate about who he is, which in my estimation goes back to this divine council. They were there in the divine council. They know who he is. And because of that, they say to him things like, we know who you are, but why are you here? Not time yet. And what does he do? Because he's the captain of the army of God, and he's taking back territory that belongs to him, you'll see that in every instance where he encounters a demonic force, he drives them out. They must have a host. In one instance in the Gospels, we see one individual has almost 2,000 demonic forces hosting them. Here's the question. We were talking about this last night. How do you become a host for demonic forces? You become a host for demonic forces when you dabble in things that say to the evil one, I am an open channel for you to do your work. When you do things like Ouija boards, when you do things like Dungeons and Dragons, certain games that are more than just games, when you say to the evil one, by your actions and by your words, I don't have any problem if you come into my life and use me as a resource. And in fact, I think we see in the Hebrew Scriptures places where kings of the earth are inhabited by the evil one, or hosted. The evil one hosts them and uses them to bring destruction and havoc on the people of God. And what does Yeshua do while he's here on this earth? Anytime he encounters demonic forces, he says, you got to get out of here. Out now. Move. Leave. He's taking back territory as the captain of the army of God. He's releasing these people from the bondage of this usage that they set themselves up for. Okay? Although, I will say this. There's one instance in the Gospels that is, to my way of thinking, is very, very unique. You have in the Gospels a situation where there's a young man, the text tells us, who has demonic forces that are hosting him. The text says in the Greek text that he is a teknon, which is a very little child. That's important because Yeshua drives out the demonic forces and then says, by the way, the forces try to destroy him. The demonic forces work to destroy humanity because we are created in the image of God. They have many weapons in their arsenal. Drugs, sex, suicide. They want to destroy you. That's their mission. Bring destruction and death. That's what they want to do. Now here's what happens. Yeshua says and drives this. The Father comes and says, can you drive this force out of my child? Yeshua recognizes it as a demonic force and commands the force to leave. Then Yeshua says to the Father, because by the time we get to this incident, he's a paideia, a child. We get pediatrics from that word. Yeshua says, how long has this been with him? And the Father says, since he was a little child. But he was a teknon. So my question becomes, how does a little child have demonic forces attached to it? Let me suggest that there are demonic forces that attach to individuals by descent of the family. They enter into a family, and they come into a family by invitation, generally. And because they're there in that family by invitation, they will then attach to other members of the family, progeny of the ones who invited them in. And sometimes they can stay in a family line for numbers of years. They can just be passed down inheritance-wise. That's what it seems to be that we have going on there. Because here you have this little teknon. It's been with him since he was a child. But my point is this, to say that Yeshua, because he's the captain of the army of hosts of God, he's the captain of the army, while he's here, he's doing the work of driving out these forces. And in fact, that's what we see with this temptation. They come and they try to take him. The Satan does, and he is able to resist. How does he resist? By the Word of God. He knows the Torah, he knows the Word of God, and through the power of God's Word, he speaks and he resists the evil one, and the evil one flees. How do we resist him? We resist him by the Word of God as well. Yeah, well, his strength is found in that Word. All right, any other questions or comments? All right.